In the annals of history, where the names of great rulers are etched, we often seek heroes, wise lawmakers, valiant commanders, enlightened reformers. Their portraits adorn textbooks. Their deeds serve as an example for generations. But what if we look at this pantheon from a different angle? What if, behind the gleaming facade of greatness, there lurks a shadow of inhuman cruelty, boundless paranoia, and cold-blooded mania? History knows leaders whose actions left an indelible mark, redrawing maps and altering the course of civilizations. But the price of this greatness was measured in millions of lives and oceans of suffering. They were the architects of a new world, but their scaffolding was at times built from pyramids of skulls. Today we will delve into the dark side of power, exploring the lives of rulers whose greatness is inextricably linked to their monstrous atrocities. Caligula, Rome, 1st century. The early history of the Roman Empire knew many tyrants, but few left such a sinister mark as Gaius Julius Caesar Augustus Germanicus, better known as Caligula. His reign, which began with hope and promise, quickly plunged into an abyss of paranoia and sadism, turning him into the archetype of the mad emperor. The first 2 years of Caligula's rule were exemplary. He issued an amnesty, repealed unpopular taxes, and initiated large-scale construction projects, winning the love of the people. But then came a sharp turning point. A terrible illness, or perhaps a congenital mental disorder, unleashed his demons. Caligula began killing people for sport, relishing their suffering before the eyes of the crowd. His sadism and debauchery became legendary. He forced senators to humiliate themselves, took his wives for his orgies, and appointed men to high office merely for their ability to flatter him. It was said that he even planned to make his horse a consul, an absolute mockery of the highest institutions of the state. His reign became synonymous with unpredictable, deadly tyranny, where any person's life depended on the emperor's momentary whim. Nevertheless, even at the height of his madness, Caligula managed to contribute to the empire's development. Beyond his successful early years, he supported chariot races and gladiatorial games, making them free for the public, which secured him the support of the common people. His massive construction projects, including aqueducts and the expansion of harbors, improved Rome's infrastructure. He sought to strengthen imperial power, albeit through despotism, and laid some of the groundwork for further centralized administration. Before his descent into madness, he was popular and effective enough to solidify his position on the throne. Nero, Rome, 1st century. Another Roman emperor whose name has become a byword for tyranny and perversion is Nero. Like Caligula, he began his reign with wise and measured decisions, but gradually descended into an abyss of arbitrary rule and cruelty, leaving a bloody trail in his wake. Nero went down in history as the emperor who, according to legend, fiddled while Rome burned. Although modern historians question his direct involvement in the Great Fire of 64 CE, he used the disaster for his ambitious building projects. It was Nero who blamed the Christians for the fire, unleashing a most brutal persecution. They were burned en masse, crucified, and thrown to wild beasts for the amusement of the crowd. His family life was no less bloody. He murdered his mother, Agrippina, and 2 wives, Poppaea Sabina and Octavia. Sadistic theatrical executions and his participation in them were part of his entertainment, and his megalomania led him to see himself as a great artist and poet who tolerated no criticism. The first 5 years of Nero's reign, known as the Quinquennium Neronis, are considered among the best in the history of the Roman Empire. He reduced taxes, helped the poor, rebuilt cities after disasters, and carried out administrative reforms. Nero actively promoted art, architecture, and culture, investing in public buildings and encouraging theatrical productions. His grand project, the Golden House, Domus Aurea, though built on the ruins of burned Rome, demonstrated an impressive level of engineering and luxury. He aspired to create a stable, prosperous state, yet his methods and personal vices nullified these achievements. Timur, also known as Tamerlane, Central Asia, 14th century. A century after Genghis Khan, another great conqueror, Timur, or Tamerlane, shook the world with his might and cruelty, seeking to revive the Mongol Empire and surpass it in scale. Timur's methods were no less horrific than those of his predecessors. After his victories, he erected ghastly pyramids of human skulls as a warning to all who dared to resist him. He destroyed dozens of thriving cities whose populations were either massacred to the last person or enslaved. One of his most terrible acts was the sack of Delhi in 1398, where about 100,000 people were killed in a single day. His campaigns were accompanied by genocide and the systematic annihilation of entire regions, which was not merely a military strategy, but a manifestation of absolute calculated cruelty. And yet, Timur was not only a destroyer, but also a great builder. He made Samarkand, the capital of his empire, a center of world culture, where the best architects, poets, scholars, and artisans gathered from all over the world. Under his patronage, masterpieces of Islamic architecture were built, magnificent mosques, madrasas, and mausoleums that still astound with their splendor. His empire controlled key trade routes between East and West, which fostered economic prosperity and cultural exchange. Timur, an educated man himself, encouraged science and art, leaving behind a legacy not only of monstrous atrocities, but also of the flourishing of Samarkand as the Pearl of the East. Ivan IV, the Terrible, Russia, 16th century. Russian history has often encountered figures whose willpower and lust for power were inseparable from unbridled cruelty. Ivan IV, nicknamed the Terrible, stands apart as a ruler who resorted to unprecedented terror to strengthen centralized authority. The name of Ivan IV, the Terrible, is inextricably linked with the Oprichnina, a side force Ivan created to eliminate betrayal inside the state. The Oprichniki, dressed in black and riding with a broom and a dog's head, symbolized the sweeping away of treason and the gnawing out of betrayal. The Tsar personally participated in torture, devising elaborate executions. People were boiled alive in cauldrons, and molten metal was poured down their throats. The culmination of his madness was the murder of his own son and heir, Ivan, in a fit of rage. This personal tragedy became a symbol of his uncontrollable fury and paranoia, which destroyed not only the families of the boyars, but also his own. Despite his bloodlust, Ivan IV was the ruler who first truly reunited the Russian lands into a centralized Tsardom of Muscovy. He conquered the Kazan and Astrakhan Khanates, significantly expanding Russia's territory to the east, and began the colonization of Siberia, laying the foundations of the future Russian Empire. He created the first rudiments of a standing army, the Streltsy, which enhanced the state's defensive capabilities, and formed the Prikaz system, a precursor to ministries, and a nationwide administration which strengthened the vertical of power. His methods were inhuman, but it was they that allowed him to break the resistance of the regional princes and boyars, creating a unified and powerful state. Peter I, the Great, Russia, 17th to 18th centuries. A century and a half later, another Russian Tsar, Peter I, continued the tradition of transformation through violence. His name is associated with grandiose reforms that turned Russia into a European power, but also with unprecedented cruelty. Peter was a man of indomitable will and equally indomitable cruelty. He personally tortured participants of the Streltsy uprising, executing thousands and displaying their bodies for public viewing. In the army he created on the European model, despotism reigned. The slightest mistake was met with execution or brutal torture. The construction of St. Petersburg, his window to Europe, was carried out at the cost of immense human sacrifice. Thousands of serfs perished from disease and backbreaking labor. The pinnacle of his ruthlessness was ordering the execution of his own son Alexei on suspicion of conspiracy, which demonstrated Peter's absolute readiness to sacrifice everything for his state objectives. Peter I was the greatest reformer in Russian history. He created a regular army and navy, which allowed Russia to win the Great Northern War and gain access to the Baltic Sea. He he introduced a European system of education, industry, and science, founding academies, schools, and factories. The city he founded, St. Petersburg, became the new capital and a symbol of a new European Russia. Thanks to his reforms, Russia transformed into a great European power, becoming a full-fledged player on the world stage. His methods were inhuman, but it was his will and readiness for extreme measures that enabled him to achieve such a colossal leap in the country's development. Leopold II, Belgium, 19th century. Moving to more recent times, we encounter rulers whose greatness for their own country was paid for with the unimaginable suffering of peoples on distant continents. Leopold II, King of the Belgians, is one of the most striking examples of such duplicity. In Belgium itself, Leopold II was known as the Builder King, who adorned Brussels with palaces, museums, and parks. But his personal colony, the Congo Free State, was turned into a living hell on earth. Under the pretext of a civilizing mission, Leopold established a system of merciless exploitation to extract rubber and ivory. For failing to meet rubber collection quotas, people's hands were chopped off and entire villages were burned to the ground. Millions of Africans died from starvation, disease, and direct violence. According to various estimates, the population of the Congo was halved, resulting in the deaths from 10 to 15 million people. It was a holocaust organized for the personal enrichment of a monarch. For Belgium, Leopold II was undoubtedly a great ruler. He not only significantly enriched the treasury, but also transformed a small European country into an influential colonial power, ensuring its economic growth and prestige. His royal ambitions were reflected in the magnificent architecture of Brussels, which contributed to the development of culture and education in Belgium itself. He was a far-sighted economist and strategist who knew how to profit from any opportunity, but the price for this was the unspeakable suffering of an entire people. Mao Zedong, China, 20th century. The 20th century brought its own versions of great maniacs in the form of totalitarian leaders. Mao Zedong, the founder of the People's Republic of China, changed China forever, but his methods led to unprecedented humanitarian catastrophes. The Great Leap Forward, 1958 to 1962, initiated by Mao, became one of the deadliest campaigns in human history. Forced collectivization, irrational economic plans, and false reports led to a mass famine in which up to 40 million people perished. Later, the Cultural Revolution, 1966 to 1976, descended upon Chinese society, destroying the intelligentsia, ancient traditions, and cultural heritage. Millions of people were sent to camps, subjected to torture, humiliation, and execution. Mao was willing to sacrifice a vast number of lives for his ideological experiments and the preservation of his absolute power. Despite these horrors, Mao Zedong is considered the father of modern China. He destroyed feudalism, unified the country after decades of war and foreign intervention, and laid the foundation for the industrial base that would later allow China to become a world power. He created a centralized state, raised national morale, and liberated the country from a century of humiliation. His vision and his ability to mobilize vast masses of people to build a new society were unprecedented, though they were paid for at a terrifying price. These rulers, separated by centuries and continents, are all united by a single ominous formula. They were not just leaders, but at times sadists, paranoids, and maniacs whose actions destroyed hundreds of thousands and millions of people. Their methods were monstrous, their hearts cold, but it was their iron will, their obsession with control, and their readiness to make any sacrifice that allowed them to break old foundations, transform societies, and build new, stronger states. Their legacy is contradictory. It forces us to look at history not as a black and white canvas of heroes and villains, but as a complex mosaic where bright achievements coexist with dark abysses. They prove that true power over the world sometimes lies not only in wisdom and virtue, but also in the ability to subordinate chaos with the force of a structured vision, even if that vision is dictated by madness and wrapped in blood. Their lives are a stark reminder of the thin line between greatness and monstrosity that always exists where absolute power is concentrated.